All right, and later on tonight, of course, Nigeria, South Africa relations and many other issues affecting our continent. The topic on African Perspective, the weekly show, Tsepiso Makwetla, your anchor, joining us. So, Muhammadu Buhari landing, we expect around 9 tonight. Yes. This was planned before the violence, before the apology about xenophobia, but it looks like those mending of fences has happened.
So the bilateral is well and underway upon his arrival, as you say, at about 9 p.m. And this is a visit that has been in the offing for a while, and there was speculation, in fact, people who were spreading fake news saying that President Buhari was now pulling out of the visit simply because of the attacks on foreign nationals. But as you've seen there with the meeting of the diplomats on foreign affairs officials, that the bilateral does go ahead on a very steady footing. Both countries will sit to talk about that. And we'll also look at what the real issues that they'll have to talk about. We'll speak to the APC representative here in South Africa, that is the governing party representative. He'll be joining us in studio. We'll also be speaking to Mukoni Rachitanga, who is a former President Thabo Mbeki's spokesperson. So he is obviously somebody who has dealt with many statesmen across many African countries, who talk about how the framing of this issue is very important, not just only about migration, but he also lends from a conversation that former President Olusegun Obasanjo had when he was here in South Africa, saying the issue of migration has to be dealt with not only with dexterity, but with the greatest of sensitivity. Because we've spoken about this many times, that there are many socio-economic push and pull factors. So we'll be looking at that. We'll be talking about service delivery against that backdrop. When I also say service delivery, we've got a case study that we'll be looking at. Isn't the burden on African governments in general on delivering services to their people? You know that there's been a school collapse in Nairobi, Kenya, that we've done here on the program. So we'll be using that as a case study. And you know, this is as a result of, since 2002, the offer of free primary school education. People have taken advantage of that. So they've been flighting city laws in order to build makeshift buildings, which are obviously not safe. So we'll be looking at that, and we'll also be looking at the royal visit, which wrapped up here in South Africa, and it wrapped up on a very positive note. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex announcing that there's going to be a major investment conference taking place here in South Africa for African countries. So we'll be looking at that and other stories.
Okay, so lots on the offering. Nigeria, Kenya, the royal visit, which has focused on Africa, even though their own issues are coming up with the tabloids, etc. On Buhari's visit, I mean, you were talking about this, the importance of migration, but also you have these two big economies, leadership important as we head towards free trade on the continent.
I mean, Francis, I think also part of the problem has been people conflating many issues, and this is why we're going to try and get to the core of ultimately what are these two leaders going to have to be focusing on. Because as much as people have sensationalized the issue, and from whence you sit when you look at this issue, people would scream xenophobia, but there's also been the imperative of dealing with migration and the responsibility that it places on the government, which is then having to upkeep the people of from various nations. So that is also a strain on the infrastructure of the country, South Africa. But it's not as if African countries themselves are necessarily pushing their people out. They face their own challenges, such as conflict, lack of resources, infrastructure that's being crippled by also conflict of many kinds, whether it's political, whether it's civil war, etc., but also just not having the resources to do that. So we'll be looking at that as well.
Okay, so what time can people join you tonight?
So from 9 to 10, African Perspective is, and has been actually now for about a month, on from 9 to 10 p.m.
Okay, so join Tsepiso Makwetla tonight at 9 o'clock. And